space race. Why was it important? How did it impact us today? And what was its significance?
2, 1.
During World War II, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, Germany attacked Great Britain using V-2 rockets developed by their rocket scientists and engineers. Wernher von Braun was one of the many scientists who surrendered to the US at the end of the war. Von Braun had a major role during the space race. He had been given the job of leading the team and developing a few of the United States rockets such as the Jupiter, Saturn, and Redstone rockets. During the Cold War, which lasted from 1946 to 1991, both the United States and Soviet Union demonstrated how powerful each country was in every way possible. The two countries didn't trust the other, and both sides were fearful of what one could do to the other. The space race had served as an opportunity for the two nations to showcase their scientific and technological capabilities. The United States and Soviet Union had competed for superiority in space as they constantly tried to top one another.
History changed on October 4, 1957, when the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik 1. About the size of a beach ball, the launch brought in new political, military, technological, and scientific developments. It is marked as one of the beginnings of the space race between the US and Soviet Union.
Бюро заводов и исполнительным советским людям особенно приятно, что коллективы научно-исследовательских институтов, конструкторских бюро УСТ 21-му съезду коммунистов.
The Soviets struck again, carrying a much heavier payload, including a dog named Laika, who successfully orbited up in space.
At Cape Canaveral, Florida, the Army's Jupiter-C rocket is ready for America's second attempt to launch a space satellite, carrying, instead of a warhead, 3 stages of solid-fuel booster rockets and the Explorer, a 6-foot bullet only inches across, crammed with electronic gear.
The Vostok 1 was the first manned spaceflight with one orbit around the Earth. The strap-attaching service module failed to separate from the capsule, leading to a wild ride before it burned through during re-entry.
5 hours before he is destined to take a giant stride into history, Colonel John H. Glenn, Jr. squeezes into his spacesuit. His smiling face belies the 10 postponements of his flight that have kept him grounded. The seconds tick off as his rendezvous with space approaches.
On September 20th, 1963, Kennedy proposed to Nikita Khrushchev that the US and Soviet Union have a joint venture up to space. The two major powers wanted to join forces, but with Kennedy's assassination in November 1963, President Johnson lacked trust, so Khrushchev dropped the idea of a joint moon program. The space race was concluded when Neil Armstrong first stepped on the moon. The space race was won by the United States as they were the first country to land on the moon. From beginning to end, the space race had captivated the world and drew a lot of attention to the United States. It was all heavily covered in the national media. Astronauts soon became the ultimate American heroes and were idolized by many men and women, whereas the Soviets were viewed as ultimate villains, desperately trying to surpass America's excellence and prove that communism is better. On July 15, 1975, President Nixon of the US Premier Leonid Brezhnev of the Soviet Union settled on a negotiation to ease relationships by having a joint Apollo-Soyuz mission to space. What would have happened over a decade ago was now a mission up to outer space to conduct experiments. The space race provided us with many breakthroughs that to us now seem common, and life would be unthinkable without them. If it weren't for NASA, we would not have cable with hundreds of television channels to keep us entertained. Satellite TV would not have been invented if scientists hadn't needed a way to communicate with astronauts in space. Originally, they had been using high-altitude balloons, but eventually began developing satellite communication technologies in the 1960s.
Laptops made their debut as the Shuttle Portable Onboard Computer in 1983, helping astronauts onboard the shuttle to carry out space navigation and other onboard functions. It was designed to be tough and powerful. It was developed for NASA by Grid Systems, the first ever model created by William Moggridge in 1979.
Originally invented for use on the Apollo lunar rover to help astronauts to steer the moon buggy around on the moon, the joystick came in handy as is now used today. Smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, initially developed to detect toxic fumes, and fire on board a Skylab space station in the early 1970s. Now they're used to detect gas leaks.
Looking at video games nowadays with their 3D graphics and virtual reality, it's hard to think that it all came from NASA. When NASA needed a way to visualize space-based environments, they turned to 3D flight simulators. The smooth landing on the moon was achieved by astronauts on board the Lunar Excursion Module because of hours of practice using flight simulators.
Although nowadays people prefer high-gloss displays, there was a period of time where non-reflective displays were on the face of every computer screen. The coating was developed for use on displays on the space shuttle to stop astronauts suffering from simply seeing their own reflection.
Ear thermometers were originally developed by NASA to measure the temperature of stars, but the US company Diatec realized there was a need for an alternative to mercury thermometers, and the new invention was quick and accurate, especially for taking temperature readings of hospital patients.
The biggest breakthrough from the space race would be satellite navigation. Unfortunately, NASA can't take the credit for inventing the Global Positioning System, GPS, but it had a big hand in modifying the device. The technology is used worldwide on aircrafts and in unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as the U.S. military.
Alright, so I think that the space program has really changed in this country in the past 50, 60 years. I think that overall people just don't view it as nearly important anymore. I'm not sure exactly why. I think maybe it has a lot to do with people just view other issues as being a lot more important than space exploration. If you look at the amount of money that's now spent on space exploration, or I guess the percentage of the federal budget that's allocated, it's at the lowest it's ever been. During the 60s, it might have been as high as 4% of the federal budget. Now it's barely even 0.5%. And I think also a lot of people don't realize, they think that a lot more is spent on space exploration, where in reality it's not only is it not very much, it's gone down every single year. Certainly there are more important and pressing issues, you know, and just taking care of people. A lot of the conflict that goes on in the world, you know, those are more important issues. And so, but on the other hand, I think it's kind of sad to see all the cuts that have been made to the space program, and also to see that it's just not nearly important as it used to be. And people aren't excited about it anymore. People don't talk about it. The shuttle program completely ended last year. There are no more plans to send any more manned missions into space ever, at least anytime in the near future. And I think a lot of people don't even know that, the shuttle program ended last year. Now, that's not to say, though, that like space exploration has stopped. It's certainly still going on. There's still research being done. It's definitely shifted, and a lot more of it is done just with computers, with robots, and so things are still happening. There is still research, you know, in hopes of doing more Mars exploration, but I just don't think you see it as nearly a priority in the news, or something that people really view as all that important anymore.
A few fun facts. Sputnik is Russian for traveler, and it was only 23 inches in diameter but weighed about 184 pounds. A spacesuit weighs approximately 280 pounds without the astronaut and takes 45 minutes to put one on. Snoopy from the Peanuts comic is the astronaut's personal safety mascot. America's first space station was Skylab, which was longer than a 12-story building and contained almost 12,000 cubic feet of living space. An astronaut is allowed about 3.8 pounds of food a day.
Although the space race is over and done with, it played a major role in history. If it weren't for the space race, life today would be unimaginable, and one can truly say that the space race has revolutionized the world for the better and will never be forgotten.